The bruises on Beauregard's arms were fresh. Dark purple against brown skin, they wrapped around his forearms like twisted rope. Jed Rourke stood in the doorway of his mountain cabin, watching his cook stuff belongings into a worn canvas bag. 3 weeks. That's how long Beau had been here. 3 weeks of the best meals Jed had tasted in his 42 years. 3 weeks of another man's voice cutting through the mountain silence. Now the bag was half-packed and Beau's hands shook. "You ain't said nothing about leaving." Jed's voice carried the roughness of a man who spent months talking only to himself. Beau didn't look up. His movements were quick, desperate. "Should have told you yesterday. Should have been gone by now." The cabin felt smaller with tension filling it. Jed had lived alone on Eagle Claw Mountain for 7 years. Solitude was his religion. Trust was a word he'd buried with his family. But watching Beau fold his spare shirt with careful hands, Jed felt something crack inside his chest. "Those marks on your arms, they're new." Beau's hand stopped moving. The shirt hung loose between his fingers. Outside, wind moved through pine branches. The sound was lonely as a funeral song. "Don't concern yourself with my troubles." Beau's voice was steady, but his eyes stayed fixed on the bag. Jed stepped closer. His boots made no sound on the worn wooden floor. Years of hunting had taught him to move like shadow. Man don't get bruises like that from cooking. The silence stretched between them. Beau's breathing was shallow. His shoulders carried weight that had nothing to do with the pack on his back. "They're coming." The words fell from Beau's lips like stones into still water. "Sheriff Thatcher's men, they'll be here before sunset." Jed's jaw tightened. He knew that name. Bartholomew Thatcher ruled Mesquite Flats with iron fists and bought judges. The kind of man who wore a badge but served only himself. "What you do to cross Thatcher?" Beau finally looked up. His eyes held the kind of pain that comes from carrying other people's deaths. "I cooked for them, the men he wanted gone. Councilman Bradley, Councilman Morrison, Judge Henley." The words hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire. Jed felt his world shift on its axis. "Cooked for them how?" "Poison." Beau's voice cracked. "Herbs mixed into their favorite dishes, made it look natural, made them sick slow, then dead." Jed's hand moved instinctively toward his rifle. Not to threaten, but from habit. When the world turned dangerous, a man reached for what kept him alive. "You killed 3 men." "I killed 3 men." Beau closed his eyes. "Thatcher had proof I stole from the hotel. Had witnesses willing to swear I threatened folks. Said I'd hang if I didn't do what he wanted." The mountain wind picked up outside. It moaned through the cabin's gaps like something grieving. Jed studied Beau's face. Saw the weight of unwanted choices carved into every line. Why run now? Why not after the first one? Tried to warn the last one. Councilman Morrison told him not to eat the stew. Beau touched his bruised forearm. "Thatcher's men reminded me what happens when I don't follow orders." Jed moved to the window. Through his spyglass he could see dust clouds in the distance. Riders coming up the mountain trail. Maybe 6 men, moving fast. "They ain't coming to collect you." Jed's voice was flat as winter stone. "They're coming to bury you." Beau nodded. His face held no surprise. "Dead men tell no stories. Thatcher's got bigger plans. Can't have loose strings." The dust clouds were closer now. Jed could make out individual horses. Iron Mike Cordell rode Point, Thatcher's deadliest deputy. The kind of man who solved problems with bullets. "Got a choice to make." Jed turned from the window. "Can send you out the back, give you a head start. Or we make a stand." Beau studied Jed's face. Looked for lies or false hope, found neither. "You don't know me. Don't owe me nothing." Jed thought about 7 years of talking to himself. 7 years of cooking beans and hardtack. 7 years of silence so thick it pressed against his skull. Then he thought about Beau's laugh when he told stories about his father. A Buffalo soldier who'd fought in 3 wars and taught his son that running wasn't always the answer. "Know enough." Jed pulled his rifle from its rack. "Know you make the best cornbread this side of creation. Know you sing hymns while you cook. Know you fed me decent meals and decent conversation." Beau's eyes widened. "You're willing to die for cornbread. Willing to live for it." Jed checked his ammunition. Question is, you willing to fight instead of run? Through the window, the riders were visible without the spyglass. 6 men with guns and rope, coming to finish what Thatcher started. Bo looked at his half-packed bag, then at Jed's steady hands loading bullets. Something changed in his face. The defeated look faded, replaced by something harder. My daddy didn't raise me to run from a fight. Bo reached under his bedroll and pulled out a cavalry pistol, well-maintained, well-loved. But we're gonna need more than cornbread and conversation to get through this. Jed smiled for the first time in months. Got a few tricks these mountain roads. These boys don't know who they're hunting. Outside, the riders grew closer. The mountain held its breath, waiting for what came next. The mountain swallowed Thatcher's men whole. Jed knew every cave, every hidden trail, every place where sound carried wrong. By nightfall, 6 riders had become 3. The others had turned back, spooked by rocks that fell at the wrong time and shots that came from nowhere. Bo moved through the darkness with soldier's precision. His father's training lived in his bones, each step calculated, each breath controlled. The frightened cook was gone, replaced by something harder. They'll be back, Bo whispered as they crouched behind granite boulders. Thatcher don't give up easy. Jed studied the remaining riders through moonlight. Iron Mike Cordell sat his horse with predator patience. 2 deputies flanked him, rifles ready. They'd made camp at the mountain's base, waiting for dawn. Let them wait. Jed's voice carried the weight of stone. Got something needs doing first. The descent to Mesquite Flats took 3 hours. They moved like ghosts through familiar darkness. Jed's mountain, Jed's rules. The town slept under scattered lamplight, unaware that 2 men with dangerous knowledge walked its empty streets. The Grand Mesa Hotel rose from the dust with false dignity. Bo knew every board, every creaking step. He'd worked here for 2 years before Thatcher's corruption swallowed his life whole. Back doors always unlocked, Bo breathed. Kitchen staff comes early. They slipped inside through shadows thick as guilt. The hotel's silence pressed against them. Bo led Jed through hallways that smelled of old tobacco and older secrets. Thatcher's private dining room sat behind the hotel's main restaurant. Rich men's business happened here, deals that bought souls and sold futures. Bo's hands shook as he turned the door handle. Cooked their last meals right here. His voice was hollow as wind through empty bottles. Watch them eat poison and smile about the taste. Jed moved to Thatcher's desk. Papers scattered across polished wood, land deeds, railroad contracts. Names crossed out in red ink. The scope hit him like cold mountain air. This ain't just about silencing opposition. Jed held up a contract. Railroads buying the whole territory. Every farm, every business. Bo examined the papers with growing horror. Look at these names. Everyone who's died, everyone who's disappeared. All of them own land the railroad wanted. The pieces fell together with terrible clarity. Thatcher wasn't just a corrupt sheriff. He was a hired killer, clearing paths for progress that ran on other people's graves. Need someone who can read legal documents. Jed gathered the most damning papers. Someone with printing press. Temperance McGillicuddy. Bo's face showed recognition. Runs the newspaper, been asking questions about the deaths. They found Temperance in her print shop, working by lamplight despite the late hour. She looked up from typesetting with ink-stained fingers and eyes that missed nothing. Bo Ashby. Her voice carried no surprise. Heard you were dead. Not yet. Bo placed the stolen documents on her desk. But Sheriff Thatcher's working on it. Temperance read in silence. Her face grew paler with each page. When she finished, her hands trembled against the paper. My God, 17 people, all for railroad money. Jed watched her carefully. Trust came hard in a world where badges meant corruption and justice wore a price tag. You willing to print this? Print it. Temperance's laugh held no humor. I'll shout it from church steeples. These documents prove everything I suspected. She moved to her printing press with sudden energy. Her hands worked metal and ink with practiced skill. The press groaned to life, each pull of the lever birthing truth onto paper. Take more than newspaper stories, Bo said quietly. Thatcher's got judges bought, witnesses scared silent. Temperance paused in her work. Something flickered across her face. Pain, maybe, or guilt long carried. There might be another way. Her voice dropped to whisper level. The men who died, what if they didn't? Jed's breath caught. Explain. Poison that makes you sick but doesn't kill. Herbs that mimic death symptoms. Fake the deaths, hide the witnesses. Bo stared at her with growing hope. You think they're alive? I think someone's been playing a longer game than we realized. Temperance pulled a hidden drawer from her desk. Inside lay more documents, maps, coded letters. Judge Blackwood's been investigating federal crimes. These deaths were too convenient, too clean. The room fell silent except for the press's rhythmic breathing. Outside, dawn touched the horizon with fingers of gold and blood. If the councilmen are alive, Jed said slowly, then Bo ain't a murderer. And Thatcher's been building evidence against himself. Temperance's eyes blazed with sudden fire. Every confession, every threat, every order to kill. Bo's face transformed. The weight he'd carried for months began to lift. His shoulders straightened. His breathing deepened. Where would they hide the witnesses? Federal safe house, probably. Outside territorial jurisdiction. Temperance folded the fresh newspapers with careful hands. But proving they're alive means exposing the whole operation. Means painting targets on our backs, Jed added. Temperance met his gaze without flinching. Already got targets there. Question is whether we die for nothing or die for something that matters. Through the shop window, movement caught Jed's eye. 3 riders approaching down Main Street. Iron Mike Cordell had found their trail. Time's up. Jed checked his rifle's load. They're here. Bo grabbed the most important documents. Temperance snatched up her fresh newspapers. They moved toward the back exit as Boots hit the front porch. Split up, Temperance whispered. Meet at the old church after dark. I know someone who can help. The door exploded inward as they slipped out the back. Cordell's voice boomed through the shop, demanding answers that wouldn't come. The hunt had moved from mountain to town, from shadow to daylight. Jed and Bo melted into the morning crowds, carrying truth that could topple kingdoms. Behind them, the print shop burned with the sound of justice taking root in poisoned ground. The game had changed. Now they weren't just running from death. They were racing towards something that might save them all. The old church held secrets in its broken walls. Jed arrived first, moving through shadows that clung to weathered stone. Temperance came from the east, newspapers tucked inside her coat. They waited in silence as darkness deepened around them. Bo never came. Cordell got him. Temperance's voice cracked like dried wood. Saw them dragging him toward the jail an hour ago. Jed's hands tightened around his rifle. 7 years of solitude had taught him to value the few connections he made. Losing Bo felt like losing family he'd never expected to have. Then we get him back. It's a trap. Temperance moved closer, her face pale in moonlight. Thatcher's using him as bait. Whole town knows by now that the mountain hermit's gone outlaw. The wind shifted through broken windows, carrying dust and distant voices. Mesquite Flats buzzed with tension thick enough to taste. Fear and curiosity walked hand in hand down every street. There's something else. Temperance's voice dropped to whisper level. Something I should have told you earlier. Jed waited. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken weight. Bartholomew Thatcher is my father. The words hit Jed like stones thrown in still water. Ripples of understanding spread through his mind, reshaping everything he thought he knew. You're his daughter. Haven't spoken to him in 3 years. Not since I learned what kind of man wears that badge. Temperance's fingers traced the newspaper in her coat. Been gathering evidence ever since, waiting for someone brave enough to help me use it. Jed studied her face in the broken moonlight. Saw pain carved deep by family betrayal. Saw determination built from watching evil wear familiar features. Why tell me now? Because tomorrow he's planning a public execution. High noon in the town square. Says he's got proof that Bo murdered those councilmen. The church walls seemed to close around them. Outside, night sounds carried the weight of approaching doom. Jed felt time slipping away like sand through desperate fingers. Judge Blackwood, Jed asked. Still alive, still working with federal marshals, but they need more time to coordinate the operation. Time we don't have. Temperance pulled a folded paper from her pocket. Her hands shook as she opened it. There's more. The witnesses, the councilmen we thought might be alive, they are hidden in the federal safe house outside Copper Creek. Hope flickered in Jed's chest. They can testify, if they live long enough. Thatcher's sending men to eliminate them tonight. Clean up operation before the execution. The pieces fell together with terrible clarity. Thatcher wasn't just killing Bo. He was erasing every trace of evidence, every witness who could destroy his railroad deal. How many men? 4 riding to Copper Creek. Iron Mike staying here to guard Bo. Temperance folded the paper with careful hands. Judge Blackwood sent word through coded messages. The marshals are outnumbered. Jed felt the mountain calling him home. 7 years of peace waiting in his cabin. 7 years of safety that could stretch into 70 if he walked away now. Instead, he checked his ammunition. Can't save them all, he said quietly, but maybe we can save enough. Temperance looked at him with something that might have been admiration. You're going after the riders. You're going after your father. I can't. He's still family, twisted as that sounds. Then you're going after Bo. Jed moved toward the church door. Get him out before dawn. I'll handle Copper Creek. Jed, Temperance's voice stopped him at the threshold. The safe house is 20 miles. 4 armed men with a head start. You won't make it in time. Maybe not. He touched his rifle's familiar weight. But mountains taught me something about impossible odds. The ride to Copper Creek carved years from Jed's life. His horse ran through darkness guided by instinct and desperation. Behind them, Mesquite Flats slept unaware that its future balanced on the edge of a knife. The safe house sat in a valley surrounded by federal agents who looked too young to die. Jed counted 6 marshals against 4 of Thatcher's killers. Even odds in any other fight. Death sentences when the killers carried experience bought with other men's blood. Marshal Hayes met Jed at the perimeter. Young face, old eyes, hands that knew their business. You're the mountain man Temperance mentioned. Come to help. Appreciate it, but this is federal business now. Jed pointed toward distant dust clouds. Those riders don't care about jurisdiction. Hayes followed his gaze. The dust clouds were closer now, moving fast through silver moonlight. 4 men with orders to kill everyone who could threaten Thatcher's empire. Witnesses inside. 3 councilmen, Judge Bradley, all supposed to be dead. Hayes checked his rifle with movements sharp as winter air. They've got testimony that'll hang Thatcher and his whole operation, if they live to give it. The first shots came with dawn. Thatcher's men hit the safe house from 3 sides, professional and brutal. Federal marshals returned fire from behind inadequate cover. Jed moved through the chaos with mountain hunters' patience. Each shot calculated, each movement precise. The attackers had expected easy targets, not a fight that bit back. By full daylight, 2 of Thatcher's men lay still in the dust. The other 2 retreated, carrying wounds and stories of federal resistance stronger than expected. Inside the safe house, 3 men who were supposed to be dead sat around a table covered with evidence. Councilman Bradley looked up as Jed entered. You're the hermit who's been stirring up trouble. Trouble was already stirred. Jed placed Temperance's newspaper on the table. Just brought it into the light. Judge Blackwood read the headlines with growing satisfaction. This is what we needed. Proof of the railroad conspiracy, signed documents, witness testimony. Got more than that. Jed met each man's eyes in turn. Got a friend sitting in jail, waiting to hang for murders that never happened. The silence stretched between them, heavy with understanding. These men had watched their own funerals, hidden while their community mourned their deaths. The weight of that deception showed in every line of their faces. Time to come back from the dead, Judge Blackwood said quietly. Time to save the man who thought he killed us. Through the window, morning light painted the valley in shades of gold and justice. 20 miles away, Mesquite Flats prepared for an execution that would never come. The game was ending. Soon, Truth would walk into that town square wearing familiar faces thought lost forever. The town square filled with faces hungry for blood disguised as justice. High noon approached with the weight of final judgment. Mesquite Flats had gathered to watch a man hang for crimes that lived only in Sheriff Thatcher's lies. Bo stood on the gallows platform, hands bound, neck measured for rope. His face carried the dignity of a man who'd made peace with dying for truth. The crowd pressed closer, drawn by spectacle and fear in equal measure. Thatcher raised his hand for silence. His voice boomed across the square with practiced authority. Beauregard Ashby stands convicted of murdering 3 upstanding citizens through poison. The sentence is death. The rope swayed in desert wind that tasted of dust and ending things. Beau's eyes searched the crowd, looking for familiar faces in a sea of strangers who'd come to watch him die. Temperance pushed through the gathered people, her newspapers clutched against her chest. She'd freed Beau from his cell just long enough for him to gather evidence, to document Thatcher's confessions with the patience of a man who knew his own value. "Wait," her voice cut through the crowd's murmur. "There's something these people need to hear." Thatcher's face darkened. "Step back, Temperance. This is legal business." "This is murder business, Father." The word hung in the air between them, Father. The crowd stirred with new understanding. Thatcher's own daughter challenging his authority in the town square where his power lived and breathed. "You've been poisoning this town longer than any cook ever could." Temperance held up her newspapers. Railroad contracts, land grabs, 17 people dead or disappeared so trains could run through their graves. Judge Cornelius Blackwood stepped from the crowd's edge, alive, breathing, looking remarkably healthy for a dead man. Gasps rippled through the gathered faces as recognition dawned. "Evening, folks." Blackwood's voice carried judicial authority that made Thatcher's badge look small and cheap. "Sorry to miss my own funeral." Councilman Bradley emerged from behind the general store. Then Councilman Morrison from beside the bank. Dead men walking in broad daylight, their presence shattering Thatcher's carefully constructed lies. The crowd's murmur became a roar. Questions flew through desert air thick with revelation. Thatcher's hand moved toward his gun, then stopped as federal marshals appeared on rooftops, in doorways, behind wagons. "Bartholomew Thatcher." Marshal Hayes stepped forward with iron certainty. "You're under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, and attempted murder." "Those men were dead." Thatcher's voice cracked with desperate authority. "This cook poisoned them. I have witnesses." "You have accomplices." Beau spoke from the gallows platform, his voice carrying across the square with quiet strength. "And I have confessions." He pulled folded papers from inside his shirt, pages covered with Thatcher's own words, documented during late-night meetings when the sheriff thought himself safe from judgment. Every threat, every order to kill, every promise of payment from railroad money. Beau's eyes found Thatcher's face. "Written in your own hand, signed with your own name." Judge Blackwood climbed the gallows steps. His hands worked the ropes that bound Beau with careful precision. "This man never poisoned anyone. The herbs he used were harmless, bitter enough to taste like death, mild enough to fake the symptoms we needed." "Needed for what?" someone called from the crowd. "To gather evidence while staying alive." Blackwood helped Beau down from the platform. "To let a corrupt sheriff hang himself with his own rope." Thatcher looked around the square with the desperation of a trapped animal. His deputies had melted away, badges abandoned in dust that would blow them into forgotten corners. Iron Mike Cordell sat his horse at the square's edge, calculating odds that no longer favored his survival. The bruises on Beau's arms weren't from beatings. Temperance's voice carried truth across the gathered crowd. "They were from our meetings, from making the violence look real enough to fool watchers." Jed emerged from behind the courthouse, leading 3 horses. His mountain solitude had been broken forever, replaced by something deeper than loneliness and stronger than fear. The federal marshals moved with quiet efficiency. Handcuffs clicked around wrists that had held too much stolen power. The railroad conspiracy collapsed under the weight of documented truth and living testimony. Thatcher looked at his daughter with eyes that held the ruins of family bonds corrupted by greed. You destroyed your own father. You destroyed yourself. Temperance folded her newspapers with careful hands. I just reported the news. The crowd began to disperse, carrying stories that would reshape how Mesquite Flats understood justice. The gallows stood empty, its rope swaying in wind that now tasted of new beginnings. Bo walked free across the square, his steps growing steadier with each yard between himself and the platform built for his death. Jed fell into step beside him, two men who'd found family in the most unlikely places. "What now?" Bo asked. "Now you cook food that heals instead of hurts." Jed looked toward the mountains that called him home. "And I learned to live with neighbors instead of just nature." Temperance joined them at the square's edge. Town needs a new sheriff, someone who understands that badges should serve justice, not corruption. Her eyes held questions about futures none of them had expected to see. The three stood together in desert sunlight, bound by shared danger and mutual respect. "Restaurant business might be good here," Bo said quietly. "Town full of people ready for honest meals. And I know a mountain man who makes regular trips to town." Jed's smile held warmth that 7 years of solitude couldn't diminish. "Might need a place to eat decent food." They walked toward uncertain tomorrows with the confidence of people who'd chosen justice over safety and found both in the choosing. Behind them, the empty gallows cast shadows that would fade with sunset, replaced by morning light and second chances. The lonely mountain man was lonely no more. The frightened cook had found his courage. The conflicted daughter had chosen her family. Mesquite Flats would heal from corruption's wounds, tended by people who understood that community meant protecting the vulnerable and feeding the hungry. In the distance, trains whistled through valleys where they belonged, carrying cargo instead of conquest, running on schedules built by honest work rather than other people's graves. And that is all to the story, for now. Please let me know where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will create a story there. Consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel, and if you enjoy our content, click this video on your screen. I promise you it's worth watching. See you tomorrow.